What's up, everybody? It's the Power Rankings Podcast, aka the Power Rankings Show. I'm your host, Elliot Harrison, and I am pleased to be joined, as always, for the second day in a row. With that, Marcus_Mosher. I quickened it
wasn't
up.
as long on that one. I'm disappointed.
Well, after hearing you and Chad talk about manly hand size and shuttle runs there for a minute offline, I thought I'd make it quicker. I'm a part of my own podcast combine. Yeah, welcome. So we were here yesterday. Marcus was sick. We didn't do Tuesday. We did yesterday. So if you were wondering, like, hey, there was no podcast Tuesday, that's because we did it yesterday. So if you missed it, go check that out. We looked at the odds for all the teams' win totals. And literally every team, we went right on down the line, did about a minute at least on every team. Pretty deep dive. And we tried to give you, if you actually want to make your own predictions or bet money or whatever, we gave you, our ideas of what we thought the best ones were and what the worst ones were that you should walk away from. But either way, we just kind of discussed the win totals. So that's a cool podcast to listen to. We do know about the Bruce Arians news. Bruce Arians is retiring. If you didn't hear that news, we're going to talk about that tomorrow, though, actually, because we're going to do a little bit of a free-flowing Friday podcast on coaches that have won one Super Bowl and kind of how they're looked at versus other coaches that either haven't won or have won multiple Super Bowls. It's actually a really interesting topic when you think about it. So we thought we'd give Bruce Arians his due by kind of dedicating part of a podcast to him instead of just having a quick chat here. Today, we're bringing in Chad Reuter, like we always do. And he and Marcus are going to do a mock draft. And Marcus, I haven't really even asked how your day is. I just started off, I just went off.
That's all right. You started with a HIPAA violation, telling everybody I was sick. It just spiraled downhill from there.
You've been saving that joke for 48 seconds.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe 55 seconds.
That's all right. I'm excited to mock draft today. I decided to get into the weeds and to make this a little bit of a crazy, wild mock.
Excited to get in the weeds. You just were in the weeds about 5 minutes ago while I was complaining about boiled eggs.
The 2-minute chat that Chad and I have before the show starts is always my favorite 2 minutes of the week because we get to really dive into some deep prospects and talk about the real nerdy stuff of NFL draft coverage that nobody else cares about but us.
Well, I don't know about that. There are a lot of draft nicks out there.
We're getting real deep into this stuff, but yeah.
I have a funny story about that, actually, about exactly what you're talking about. Just real quick. Well, by the way, I just want to make sure everyone can commiserate with me on this. There are certain things in life that when you're in a hurry, you need them to go quickly. I'm not going to mention them all or some of the ones that are really annoying. But one of them is when you just want a boiled egg. And usually when you're not in a hurry at all, that shell just comes right off. But when you got a podcast to do and you have a great guest and your producer Courtney's waiting on you, it wants to go in a billion pieces. It is so frustrating. I know we've all been there, right? Or you're not a boiled egg guy?
I'm not really an egg guy in general, but yeah, go ahead. I got the point.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's research that egg yolk is good for your hair, the proteins in it, just if you'd like to know, everyone. All right. Yeah, good talk. Right. Also, one other thing I wanted to just mention is, we are doing a mock draft. It's Marcus and Chad alternating picks. We're going to do the top 10. But just an interesting note that many of you probably don't know, and I'm not going to spend 10 minutes on it, just a quick little history story here. The first overall pick in NFL history. So the first draft, the first number one pick was a guy out of the University of Chicago named Jay Burnwanger. And he didn't even play. This is so funny to me. The first overall pick decided not to play football. I think he went to med school. Is Is that crazy? He was a quarterback out of the University of Chicago, college football star. I think the Philadelphia Eagles picked him number 1. And he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to do something else with my life. So the draft was off to a fast start. Did you know that story?
I didn't know that he didn't play football, but that's fine. Probably more money in med school back then than professional football.
Oh yeah, man. In the 1930s, like in the championship game, I know in 33, their championship game, if you won the championship, you made $210.64. That was the winner's share per player of the 1933 NFL championship. So by 1936, it's not going to be that much higher because we were right in the middle of the Depression. I say I wasn't born yet. But anyway, yes. So you are right. Teaching paid you more money. So there you go. I could go all day on this topic. We're not going to spend all day on that. What we're doing here. So Marcus, that you're going to have the first pick when we bring Chad in here, right? Are you nervous?
Yeah, I don't want to mess this up for Jacksonville because they've had a flawless offseason so far.
If you guys could have heard Marcus and Chad offline. So Chad's always very diligent. He comes in, he makes sure that his shot is set up. He's on time, unlike your host. And they start talking about 7th round tight ends from, Alabama Teachers College. And it's just like, you're like, where am I? I feel like it's the scene where in that famous movie where Steve Carell is painting the guy's legs. You remember in his jacket, he goes, now I'm going to paint your jacket blue. I guess you don't remember that, do you?
No.
It's too obscure. I think Chad does. Speaking of, come on, you never saw 40-Year-Old Virgin? Really?
It's been a long time.
Oh my gosh. All right. Let's bring Chad in. We've talked about him enough. Chad Reuter from NFL.com, my former and current colleague. I corrected it, Chad. Well done. He can be reached on Twitter at Chad_Reuter. That's REUTER. Check him out there. And before I even ask you how you're doing, a big congratulations here. You re-upped for 2 years with NFL Network and NFL.com. I guess it's still NFL Media. I assume that's what they're still calling it. But hey, Chad, that's great, man.
Thanks. So yeah, it was great. Great to sign on for a couple more years and continue to do this stuff. It's you got to pinch yourself sometimes when you get to do this stuff for a living. So it's pretty fantastic.
So now you can go to that secondhand store and spend $80 on a Nintendo like you were probably wanting to do. You're like, gosh, should I spend the money? Should I not? Actually, you don't strike me as a big Nintendo guy.
I would do that if only to buy Super Mario Brothers 3 and try to, beat it as quickly as possible, like I did back in 1991 and 92 when, listening to Nirvana, Nevermind when it came out, and Soundgarden and all that. So, yeah, that would be fun for about a day, and that'd be like, why did I spend my money on this thing? And maybe I'll just borrow one from somebody and do that. Listen, I thought we were doing round 4, like a mock draft of round 4 today.
That'd be a lot of fun. A day 3 mock. That'd be great. Let's do it.
Yeah. I think the next couple shows, the next one could be like, day 2 mock draft, and then the next one, day 3 mock draft. What do you think, Elliot?
Oh, listen, it's y'all's podcast at this point. Let's be honest. You did say a couple of things though, that before we get into this mock draft, I've got to say now, Marcus, I never played Mike Tyson Punch Out, but everyone knows, well, most people know if they've seen your Twitter avatar, you're a huge fan. Was that on the original Nintendo?
Yeah, it was on the NES. I was a huge NES fan. So I've got the little replica one now with like 300 games on it. I play it all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Super Mario 3 was one of my favorites. Contra was one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
I can relate with you.
Chad, what were your like 2 or 3 go-tos?
No, it was just Super Mario Brothers 3 for me on Nintendo.
That's it. No Zelda.
By that time, I was in college. I found some other things to do eventually, like study. But I did get the Atari 2600 when it first came out. I was like 9 years old. And so I played Combat, Pitfall. I mean, all those classic game, Pac-Man, of course, all those games. And I spent a lot of time doing that when I was a kid, probably too much.
I think my first game was Pong. Do you remember Pong?
Yes, Pong.
Oh, we had the original 2-dial Pong. My freshman year in college, I was living in the football dorm, and we had Tecmo Super Bowl tournaments. Literally, guys would come over. We always had a healthy supply of peanut butter and jelly in our little mini fridge. And yeah, the other thing I want to say real quick too, you mentioned Soundgarden Nirvana. Boy, Taylor Hawkins passing, man, that hit me, Chad. I didn't say anything about our podcast, but I'm a big music fan. Chad's a big music fan. Marcus, I don't know, are you a big music fan or just kind of meh? Just kind of.
Yeah, I'm into music, but more from like the 2000s rather than the 80s and 90s.
I understand. Well, Taylor Hawkins was drummer for Alanis Morissette. Then, of course, more famously, the drummer for Foo Fighters. But yeah. Anyway,
and they did a lot. His last performance, he usually did this in concerts. Did Queen's "Somebody to Love," and Queen is my favorite group, as is evidenced by this. I don't know if you can read that really well. Queen. There you go.
There it is.
So yeah, it was really sad. And another loss of a great musician.
Oh yeah, he would have gone very high in my mock draft. That is for sure, man. That guy was, and he's a good dude. Just seemed like a really, really good dude. I tell you, so I'm kind of excited for this because just to kind of turn the page here, I've done a mock draft with Chad before, and that's how I always studied for the draft because they gave us this gigantic binder to study all the. I mean, Marcus, you would have loved it. I mean, this binder was like 750 pages of draft goodness. But that wasn't my strength. So I've done a mock draft with Chad and a couple of guys over beers and nachos. And I think a mock draft is a great way to learn about the prospects and the teams and the fit and how it's going to play out. So Chad insisted that Marcus have the first pick. We're just doing the top 10 for today. Maybe we'll do a 32 at some point if we can go through it quickly. But I wanted to give this podcast a chance to breathe. Any thoughts, though, before we get started from either of you?
Yeah, I'll go first. This is going to be one of the wildest drafts that we've seen in a long time because typically you have quarterbacks in the top 4 or 5 that kind of solidify things and it makes it a little easier to project where players are going. I think once we get past pick 1, this draft is going to be wild. You're going to see some crazy names picked inside the top 10. You're going to see some guys that were routinely mocked inside the top 5. They're going to fall maybe into the teens or even into the 20s. I think we're going to see a lot of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I've gotten into this, right? If we knew what was going to happen, we wouldn't do it, right? I mean, so that's the fun part about it. And I'm really excited to see, what the next month brings in terms of trades before the draft and new information about guys and stuff like that'll make it really exciting about a month from now.
All right, so you guys are alternating. This isn't a fantasy snake draft, so don't get all excited. Yeah, now if we did an auction draft like in fantasy, that would be a lot of fun. I love auction drafts in fantasy. We should do that once, Marcus, this summer. But Marcus, you were on the clock for the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're following on Brinks TV, they're at the top of our rundown. What are you going to do here, bud?
I think in an ideal world that Jacksonville takes somebody that can help out Trevor Lawrence, whether that's an offensive tackle or receiver, but there's just nobody available at number 1 that makes a lot of sense. So they take the best defensive player in the draft, and Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. They pair him with Josh Allen. I know Elliot's favorite joke is that Josh Allen sacked Josh Allen last year, but so we're not going to do that. Aiden Hutchinson, Josh Allen, they signed Arden Key. They have Dwayne Smoot. I think that's a pretty decent defensive line. So I'm going Aiden Hutchinson at number 1 for Jacksonville.
What do we think of that, Chad?
I think he's the odds-on favorite at this point. The sleeper there is Travon Walker from Georgia, which would be pretty amazing given his role in that Georgia defense. And we'll probably end up talking about him later. But I'll just say that's kind of the other guy. And you said, maybe we pick a guy to help Trevor Lawrence. And yes, they franchised Cam Robinson and they picked Walker Little in the 2nd round last year. It's not out of the realm of possibility that right now they're talking up Juwan Taylor as being a really good player, but he's going to be a free agent next year. And would it shock me if they took Evan Neal and then jettison Taylor? It would not shock me at all. So that's another one that small probability, but something to put in the back of your mind.
I agree.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys talk about helping out Trevor Lawrence, and then you said, but I could see them taking, a defensive player. In my mind, maybe the best supporting cast for a quarterback is a great defense. I mean, you look at Russell Wilson early in his career, he could walk out on that field and say, I scored 20 points today. We win. I mean, what better supporting cast can you have? When everyone would boo-hoo that he didn't have a great offensive line, I'm like, yeah, but he doesn't have to put any points on the board, So I'd love to see the Jags bolster their defense a little bit more, and I hate that Josh Allen joke. If I hear it one more time, the worst. Okay. All right. So you're on the clock, Chad. Detroit Lions, number 2 overall pick. You saw what Marcus did. Did that change your plans?
No. I think the Lions have to really seriously consider taking Malik Willis, the quarterback, at number 2. And the reason I say that is because they are in a situation where they have a guy that they can't possibly like in Jared Goff. They can't possibly like that guy as their quarterback. And they took on they get these extra future picks, etc. I think Willis is going to be a very good pro quarterback. And I think they saw him at the Senior Bowl. They coached him. He's smarter than people give him credit for. And in the league right now, you need a playmaker at the quarterback position. And that's what he's going to be. And they don't have to play him. But the nice thing is they have Goff. So you don't have to play him this year. If you put in special packages for him or whatever, that's fine. But they're in a really good position of being able to pick a guy and not have to worry about him necessarily starting day one. I think halfway through last season, Campbell probably would have benched Goff and put Willis in if they had him.
That's true.
The way you're talking about him. So, they played better at the end of the year. But for right now, that's one pick that I can really see happen.
I don't hate it. I think Detroit's in a good situation where, they don't have to play Willis in year one. They do have somebody in Jared Goff that can be a bridge quarterback. They've got another first-round pick. They've got a high second-round pick. You can still improve your team in the draft and grab a franchise quarterback. This is one of the few teams in the draft that I wouldn't hate selecting Willis. So I'm okay with this.
I guess I didn't think Jared Goff played as bad as other people do last year. And Marcus, I actually watch Lions games because they're part of, as you like to call them, Elliott Harrison specials. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, and we did a podcast on this last Friday, if you didn't catch that one, about is it worthwhile to draft a quarterback and then have him sit? Because the more he plays early, the more your window is open to put pieces around him. But Chad, I also understand your logic. If he can learn and then put him in packages and then play him by year 2, you're still accomplishing the same goal. So I like the gutsiness of your pick as well. So, okay. So we got 2 off the board. We're on to pick number 3. It's the Houston Texans. Marcus, you're up. What do you got?
Yeah, I think Houston's got to upgrade their defense, and they've got to get some guys that can rush the passer. But I think that's why they're going to go with Travon Walker. Now, Walker is going to be an unprecedented pick inside the top 3. He had 13 career tackles for a loss in 3 years at Georgia. 13. Typically, you want an edge rusher and you're drafting inside the top 5 to average close to 2 tackles for a loss per game. He averaged about a half, which is well below average. But you are getting a rare athlete, 6'5", 275. And in that Lovie Smith defense, I think they're going to want guys that can play multiple positions. I think Walker can play at the edge. I think you could have him be a standard 4-3 defensive end. He can play 5 technique. I just think he's a rare athlete with position flexibility that you have to take high.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be in the 3 or 4 area at the least. I think the Jets would love to get him at 4 as well. That's who I would have taken at 4. And I think, in terms of his productivity, if Jermaine Johnson, who's likely to be a mid first round pick, wouldn't have left to go to Florida State, his production wouldn't have been that great either this year because of Nolan Smith, Adam Anderson before he got the legal troubles, Nakobe Dean. I mean, there are so mmany guys on that defense making plays that Walker didn't have to be the guy to make the play, nor was he asked to come off the edge. So, it's his situation can be special in terms of what he did. And another guy, Nick Bosa, for example, didn't produce because he got injured, right? So, I mean, there's always exceptions to these rules in terms of productivity and all that stuff. Now, there is a level of risk there as well. But every pick is that way. You've got some risk. It's a balance of risk and talent. I think he's going to go pretty high.
Can I say this really quickly, Elliot?
Yeah.
There's been 2 players in NFL history that are way over 270 pounds and run a sub 4.55 40-yard dash. It's Trayvon Walker and it's Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the list. He is a rare athlete. And I know the production's not great, but you gamble on guys that are that big and that athletic.
Yeah, and that's why he could end up going number 1 because if you match him, like Aiden Hutchinson matches up very well with Joey Bosa, who went 3, and Walker matches up very well with Myles Garrett and, as you mentioned, Clowney. So, we'll see what happens, but yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
I think your comparison to Jadeveon Clowney is apropos here because Houston took Jadeveon Clowney, number 1. Can we say that Jadeveon Clowney was worth the number 1 overall pick? He's had a decent NFL career.
Yeah, I would say it is, right? I mean, he's not
a decent career. He's performed like a second-round pick, I would say.
I would disagree with that a little bit. I think he's been better than what the stats show.
A lot of number 1 picks
so.
haven't been as good as a number 1 pick, whether it's a quarterback or any other position. Eric Fisher, Jake Long was a really good tackle. Is he worth, quote, a number 1 pick? I mean, you could say that about a lot of positions, but in this draft, it's tough, especially with Jacksonville already having a quarterback in play. I mean, they have to take somebody, and I don't think anybody's going to trade for that pick. It would be pretty amazing if somebody traded for that pick.
Well, let's get on to the Jets here. I'm just saying, if I have the 3rd overall pick and I have as many holes as the Texans, I want a sure thing, man. I want the most sure thing I can possibly get, even if it means I'm reaching a little bit, just a guy that I know is going to be great. Okay, but the New York Jets are on the clock, which means Chad's on the clock. What do you have, Chad?
Well, now that Marcus took my pick, I think that you know what? I'm going to go Kayvon Thibodeau. I think an edge rusher like him. I think there is a thought that he will drop in this draft, and I understand why. But I think he's going to be a fantastic player. I think this year, when Myles Garrett played his final year at Texas A&M, he was hampered by injury a lot of that year, and he wasn't always as explosive and as productive as you would have expected from him. And I think Thibodeau suffered from that a little bit this year. The team also wasn't great, so he didn't get a lot of chances to show what he could do. So between those two things, dropping into coverage quite a bit as well this year is a little odd. I mean, it showed that he could do it, but I don't think that's his, going to be his bread and butter. So I think he's a really good player. And if the Jets are facing this situation and they don't trade out, which is also a possibility, I think Thibodeau is the pick for him.
Yeah, I have no problem at all. I think this is somebody a year ago was probably the favorite to be the number 1 pick in the class. You put him on that defense with Robert Saleh and Quinnen Williams and Carl Lawson. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think he has the highest upside of any pass rusher in this class.
I think with any team, getting a pass rusher is never a bad idea. And the Jets addressed one of their big needs, I thought, in free agency by signing in the offensive line area. So I don't mind this pick for them. I just I'm still reeling over the Houston Texans pick. I got to be honest. So
it's all right.
So here we go. So New York Giants are number 5. The Giants have multiple picks, as do the Jets. So Marcus, what do you have for the Giants at number 5?
The Giants have to be thrilled with the way that this draft has kind of fallen for them, because now they get the choice of the offensive lineman in this class. And I love the Evan Neal fit for them, a monster offensive tackle from Alabama who played over 1,000 snaps at right tackle in 2020. He played left tackle in 2021. He also has experience at left guard. So no matter what the Giants want to do with him as a rookie, if they want to play him next to Andrew Thomas at left guard, you could do that. If you want to play him at right tackle, he can do that. I think this is the ideal pick for the Giants at number 5.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's in that mix. I think Ike Ekwonu could be in the mix, but to be honest, I think, we'll probably talk about him with a later pick, but I think there are reasons why you look at a guy like Evan Neal and he goes first before Ike. So yep. I think it makes a lot of sense. And you can play him on the right side real easy. He's got experience there. So I think it makes sense.
John Mara came out. I was a little shocked, not shocked, but surprised that he basically blamed the organization as a whole for letting down Daniel Jones. Well, this would be one step, right, in helping Daniel Jones. If you're going to truly evaluate him, got to protect him. as mobile as he is. So plus you never know, he might trip over his own feet. So sorry, poor football humor. Okay. But I like the pick there. So you redeemed yourself for the Houston pick. Nice job, Marcus. Okay, so now we're on number 6, the Carolina Panthers. Chad, yesterday Marcus and I were talking about Carolina, and I told Marcus, I don't know what the plan is for these guys, but you got to think their coach is kind of on the hot seat. What do you think Carolina can do right now to help their team?
Well, I think they take Kenny Pickett. The only thing that would stop that is if they decide that Jimmy Garoppolo's shoulder is going to be fine and they make a trade for him. But otherwise, I think they want a guy that they know has a lot of experience, that can come in and run an offense and make some plays with his feet. And he's a pretty good athlete for his size. And he's a guy that could come in and start for him. And certainly, Sam Darnold may or may not be there this year. Who knows what they're going to do with him? Matt Rule is not patient with guys. And because he knows that if it doesn't work, he's going to be the one that loses his job. And I think for most rookie, like Malik Willis probably maybe not be a great fit for them because of that. But I think Pickett has enough experience, worked with Mark Whipple, at Pitt really. And look, Pat Narduzzi is not a BSer. And when Pat Narduzzi says that Kenny Pickett's going to be a better pro quarterback than Kirk Cousins, then I take him for his word from that. It's not a super high bar, but I think it's enough to say, Carolina, look, we have guys on defense. We got a guy to come in here, run our offense, make some plays with his legs when applicable. Let's get this guy, and let's hope that he's our future.
Yeah, I think you nailed the pick, and I absolutely hate it. I would not let Matt Rule and the current GM mess up my future by picking a quarterback to try to win right now. There's offensive linemen between Ike Ekwonu and Charles Cross and Trevor Penning that could all upgrade that offensive line in a big way. Listen, Matt Rule, you spent all your draft capital to go get Sam Darnold last year because you were convinced he's a franchise quarterback. I would want him to show me that he's the answer. Build up the offensive line, but yeah, I feel like Pickett's going to be the selection here.
So, Chad, in case you don't know, well, I know you're a regular listener of the podcast, but Marcus has long been out on Panthers culture. Long been out. Yeah. But Cross is a guy I heard you guys discuss quite a bit in one of our previous podcasts. So he's still on the board. Would the Giants dare take both of those guys, take two big offensive linemen I don't think so, but they're next on the clock here. What do they do, Marcus?
Probably not. Although, man, it'd be really appealing if you could get Evan Neal and Ike Ekwonu and just completely solidify your offensive line. Then we're cooking. But they've got some other needs on defense. I'm going to pick Ahmad Sauce Gardner, the cornerback from Cincinnati. We know in Wink Martindale's defense, corners are really important because he's going to put those guys out on an island and use the front 7 guys to blitz. So you've got to have good cornerbacks. It sounds like they could be trading James Bradbury. They need somebody that profiles as the number 1 corner. I think Sauce Gardner here at number 8, or number 7 would make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably what's going to happen in my next mock draft as well. I've been looking at that, and that would make a lot of sense for them to do something like that. So I'm on board with that one. It will be interesting down the line, though, who turns out to be the better corner, Sauce or Derek Stingley. We haven't seen a healthy Derek Stingley for a while, so that's the problem in his head. But it's going to be interesting to watch those two's career and see who turns out to be the better player.
Don't you feel like Sauce Gardner's personality kind of fits like a Wink Martindale defense, right? Yeah. Kind of on edge, aggressive, mean. That's what the Giants defense has lacked for the last several years.
It's true. And you've seen, and the funny thing is, like, a lot of people are, talking down the quarterbacks in this draft. And then you pick a guy like Sauce Gardner, who's a fantastic player. Is he as good as Jalen Ramsey coming out?
No.
Probably not. Did Jalen Ramsey get burned in the Super Bowl really badly and need Matthew Stafford to bail him out? He did. So it's just when people are talking about, quarterbacks are so risky early in the draft. Well, guess what? So are cornerbacks, and so are every other position. But I mean, that doesn't look. I like Sauce Gardner as a player quite a bit. He's going to be very similar to Patrick Surtain. I think people are going to view him in that same realm. So yeah, the pick makes sense.
Well, Atlanta already has one of the best corners in the game right now. Would they be looking for secondary help here, Chad, at pick number 8, or are you going somewhere else?
Well, I don't want to trigger you and have them pick a quarterback. So I think what I'll do is I'll pass on Matt Corral, even though that's probably part of their plan. I think he would fit in really well with them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Jordan Davis, defensive tackle. I think he is a beast. I think he'll go somewhere in the 8 to 12 area. Really good player. Not just all about stuffing the run, but Falcons need help there. There's no question about that. But I think he has the ability to make life not very appealing for quarterbacks when he's showing up in the pocket. If they ask him to hit the one gap, use his length to affect passing lanes, I think he's gonna really affect plays. So I think somebody's gonna take him pretty early.
I think Jordan Davis at 340 pounds and Grady Jarrett playing next to each other would be a lot of fun. I think that at least gives you a core for a nice defense, along with AJ Terrell. They've got Deion Jones. Yeah, at least build up one side of the ball. So when eventually you find your franchise quarterback, they're not having to put up 35 points a game like Matt Ryan has to do over the last couple of years. So I think I like it. I think that's a bold pick that makes a lot of sense.
I actually like this pick a lot as well because you're talking about getting great interior pressure. Tom Brady's not throwing the 15-yard outside the numbers that much in his career right now. A lot of it's slants over the middle stuff. Get those linemen, get penetration, get their hands up, makes life difficult. You got Jameis Winston in New Orleans, who we know is prone to the turnover. You get pressure in a quarterback's face. He's going to throw balls late and high. That happens. And then, well, I'm not even going to mention Carolina because I don't want Marcus to go off on Sam Darnold.
Well, a lot of the game is being played, between the hashes right now too. I mean, it's not just those guys. So, he's obviously the fantastic athleticism is hard to ignore.
Agreed. Okay, so next up on the clock, here we go. We'll run the rundown. And Marcus, you are on the clock, my friend.
Yeah, with the Seattle Seahawks. This was tough because I could see Seattle taking a quarterback here. I could see them making a weird selection that we don't really see coming because they're just a little bit of a weird drafting team. But if Ike Ekwonu, the offensive tackle from North Carolina State, is here, they've got to take him. He can play guard. He can play tackle. We'll see what happens with Dwayne Brown. That offensive line's not very good. And this would at least give them somebody up front that can play multiple positions, that can kind of help Pete Carroll get back to this run-first offense. I think this is a no-brainer pick for Seattle.
Yeah, I think they are, again, another team that probably could take Matt Corral here. But I'll tell you what, Ekwonu, what I alluded to earlier, he's 6'4" flat. And not a lot of top 5 offensive linemen are not like 6'5", 6'6", 330 pounds. And what that kind of body shape reminds me of guys like Jedrick Wills, who went 10th, Rashawn Slater, who went 13th. So a lot of people are pushing Icky into the top 3, prospects, and that's great because he's phenomenal and he's a lot of fun to watch. But I'm not going to be surprised if he ends up going 8, 9, 10, 11, based on what teams like Matt Rule comes out and says, Rashawn Slater has a guard build. We weren't interested in that. Well, of course, that's ridiculous because he's a fantastic tackle. Yep. And so other teams may still Ekwonu's length is good. 34 inch arms. He's good there, but he doesn't necessarily, and some teams may not even project him as a tackle. So I think 9 is a great, I've put him in other mocks at 9, makes a lot of sense. And we'll see where he ends up.
You guys think with Seattle's history, now I recognize that Drew Lock is not Russell Wilson, but Drew Lock has pretty good mobility, that they would take an offensive lineman this high?
That's the hard part, is predicting what Seattle does, because they are the wildest drafting team in the league. It wouldn't shock me at all, Elliot, if they do something crazy like draft the first off-the-ball linebacker at 9 to replace Bobby Wagner, or
Devin Lloyd to replace Bobby Wagner. That's not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
Say in the Pacific Northwest, right, and draft Devin Lloyd, or draft maybe they could draft Jordan Davis if he was here at number 9 and really beef up the middle of their defensive line. They're the one team I just don't have a firm grasp on at all what they could do in round 1.
Right. And I think the one thing that would work for Ekwonu is he is the body type that the Seahawks have usually taken. whether it's James Carpenter or Jermaine Ifedi or those kind of guys. That's who they've usually taken. So that's the one thing that I think plays. I get what you're saying, but I think that's one thing that makes it a little bit more of a fit in this case.
Sure.
Interesting. Well, I could see Seattle trading out of this spot, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Why pick ninth when you can turn this into another first round pick or turn it into a couple day 2 picks and just get more guys on your board? They need talent. They're in one of the toughest divisions in the NFL right now. That's what I could see Seattle doing. But I am not the draft Nick that you guys are.
And that's certainly a possibility. But what's interesting? They could also trade up because they already have extra draft capital from Russell Wilson. And in an article that's coming out tomorrow on NFL.com, you just might see something like that.
You shill. Yeah, I can see them. I could see them drafting up to take a quarterback. It's interesting, Chad, just before we get to our last pick here, the New York Jets, who are on the clock for the second time. So Marcus's team that he really can't figure out is Seattle. What the plan is. Mine is Carolina. Do you have one team that when you did your mock draft, you're like, I have no idea what this organization is doing. I don't know what the plan is. I'm just going to plug a name in here because I'm allowed to mail it in on one pick of my mock draft.
No, but I think there's always a team either in the 10 to 12 area or in the early 20s that you look at their needs and you're like, oh, all the guys at that position are gone. And it's a little too early to take one of these kind of guys. And there's 2 teams in that situation this year, I think. Baltimore at 14 and Arizona at 23. And another projected trade that's going to be in that article tomorrow helps Baltimore get out of that spot and do some things. And I think they would be in a good position. So Baltimore and Arizona are those 2 teams where it's kind of like, well, this is a good spot for a trade. Or maybe a guy falls to them that you're not sure of.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got one more pick here on the board. Chad, you are up. It's pick number 10. It's the New York Jets on the clock for the second time. That's right. That the Giants and Jets have 2 picks apiece. If you guys didn't know, in the top 10, I know you 2 know this. So, Chad, what are the Jets thinking? Partially based on their earlier pick.
Well, I think Kyle Brady out of Penn State would be a great pick here for the Jets. No, but I think on offense, they got to be looking at receiver here. Obviously, Derek Stingley would be an interesting pick at cornerback. But look, Corey Davis, you don't know what you're get out of him. You got Elijah Moore. You lost Crowder, I think. Yeah, you lost Crowder. You need more weapons on offense. So the question is, do you like a Garrett Wilson or do you like a Drake London from USC? What type of receiver are you looking for? And I think with Elijah Moore there already and maybe being able to pick up a smaller receiver later in the draft, I think Drake London is a good fit for them here at 10. And I think that the injury hurt him obviously it hurt him. didn't help him get into the national scene this year. And I think if he was fully healthy, be able to do the workouts, I think he would be really well. Some people like to compare him to Mike Evans, and he's not as big and strong as Mike Evans, so I don't think that's quite right. But, he's somewhere between Mike Evans and A.J. Green when he was coming out. And I think he's got some of that agility that A.J. had and some of the physicality, and I think he gets a little bigger. So I think there's a really high ceiling for Drake London.
Yeah, Chad Reuter, noted Braxton Berrios hater. Didn't even mention.
I was just about to say. That's what I was going to say.
And look, you know what? I'm definitely not a Braxton Berrios hater. I really am not. But they could find other guys to help out Braxton. Let's just put it that way in the slot.
But I think that's exactly why Drake London makes a lot of sense, right? Because Berrios and Elijah Moore are both smaller receivers. Yeah. They have 2 tight ends that they signed this offseason, CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin. They just need that big outside guy that can make plays down the field. I think Drake London compares very favorably to like Mike Williams of the Chargers. I think he could do that type of role. Is it a little high at 10? Maybe, but you gotta put weapons around Zach Wilson in order to give him a chance to succeed. So I don't hate it. I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think the Jets are a prime, and I think in every mock draft, I'll probably have them trading out of 10 because I think they're another team that's in that perfect spot where they took their elite player early. They have a lot of opportunities for other teams that have interest in a receiver or a quarterback or a cornerback, whatever. They have a lot of, and Lord knows they need talent.
I would also say, Chad, they're in a good spot with Washington drafting directly behind them. If a team wants to come up and get a quarterback and they're nervous that Washington would take one, they can come up to 10. If a team wants a receiver and they're nervous that Washington would take a Garrett Wilson, maybe you see somebody jump from, let's say, the Chargers at 17 up to 10. I could see that as well. So I do think the Jets are a good trade down team here at 10.
Boy, listening to you guys, did y'all ever see that Brady Bunch episode where Peter and was it no, it wasn't Peter, it was Bobby, the youngest one. He insisted on being able to go on the date with Greg.
Yep.
So he was in the back seat with his frogs. He had his frogs.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm Bobby and you guys are on a date. And then when Greg brought down the convertible top, didn't Bobby pop the umbrella because it was raining?
That's right.
The umbrella poked through the hole okay. Well, anyway, that's what I feel like right now. Okay. So good stuff. So did you guys surprise each other at all here? Does this illuminate anything? Do you think this is an accurate depiction of how it will go?
I think it's fairly accurate. What's surprising though, is if you look at like the consensus board right now of the top 10 draft media members, the number 2 player in this class is Kyle Hamilton, safety from Notre Dame, who we don't have going inside the top 10 of our mock. Derek Stingley, another cornerback that's very highly rated, didn't go inside the top 10 of our mock. So this is why this draft is going to be so much fun, because depending on how one pick goes inside of the top 2 or 3 can change the rest of this draft.
The only thing that I know about this draft is whoever the consensus says is going to be the top 10 is not going to be the top 10 picks. That's the only thing I can tell you for sure in this draft, because it never works out that way. Never, ever. When you start getting closer to April 26th, then maybe there'll be a little more surprise, but in March, there's a lot of changes yet to come. And that's why I do the things that I do to try to do things a little differently, to try to make it so like, look, let's look at what's going to happen in a month, not what conventional wisdom tells us is going to happen today, because that's rarely correct.
I think the pick that surprised me the most out of the 10 was you taking, Chad, when you're on the clock for Detroit, taking Malik Willis. Again, I'm not a draft analyst, but everything I've heard about him is that he's kind of raw. He's a great athlete, but not necessarily a top 10 quarterback pick. Would you consider that? Did you consider that a reach on your part? Or do you fully expect a team to take him in the top 5?
No, I think look, there's no certainties, right? He could drop all the way down to 12 to 15. I mean, there's no certainties of this whatsoever. However, in the past, I've seen like Patrick Mahomes wasn't on mock drafts in March at all in the first round. Daniel Jones, people didn't think he was going to go in the top 10. Mitch Trubisky rated at the bottom of the first round at best. So a lot of the guys that people love to hate quarterbacks, they expect quarterbacks to act like they're 10-year NFL veterans when they're 20, 21 years old. That's not going to happen. Deshaun Watson I was just reading some old mock drafts about how Deshaun Watson's an athletic quarterback and blah, blah, blah. These guys can throw the ball. And Malik Willis can throw the ball. If Auburn would have chosen him over Bo Nix a couple of years ago, we'd be talking about Malik Willis a lot more, because he would be running a really good Auburn offense right now. So I think he's really underrated. And even if he isn't drafted that high, which is a definite possibility, I think the Steelers would love to come up and get him. I think there's going to be a real interest if he falls like Justin Fields, like Watson, like Mahomes, some of these other guys that people don't think are polished. They just make plays. They throw the ball, they run, they make defenses very uncomfortable. And I think Josh Allen is another perfect example of a guy like, oh, he's raw, he's not accurate. Well, guess what? You can get better at that, and you can also do a lot of great things to defenses while you're working on that. So I think Willis is going to be a good NFL quarterback. I'm not going to put him in the Hall of Fame, but I think he's a good NFL quarterback. He's got a real chance with good surrounding cast. And I think Dan Campbell saw in the combine, actually, when he was talking at the combine and they were asking him about what do you look for in players. I want really good football players. I don't care if I have to change my offense or my defense around them to scheme them up. I want good football players. And I think Malik Willis is a good football player.
Chad, I'm going to ask you one more question as my final word before we head out. If there's one player that could surprise everybody and go inside of the top 10 picks, who would it be? Like somebody that's just not being mentioned inside the top 10 at all.
Well, it's hard for me to say who's been in who most people I think, because I think Jordan Davis will go there. I think Sauce, we've already got him in there. Drake.
Can I give you a name and you
Sure.
tell me if it's crazy?
Sure.
What about Chris Olave inside the top 10?
If you want to compare him to Devontae Smith, who went 10, I wouldn't hate that. I don't
More
see
speed?
it. I don't see it happening right now myself, but you know what? This is why we love doing this, because we don't know, and it's great. And so he's a really talented player. I see more of a Rashad Bateman, one of these guys that kind of goes between 18, 23, something like that for him right now. But with Wilson and London and James, Jameson Williams.
There you go.
That's the guy that's going to be the surprise if he goes in the top 10, because he would be there. If not for that ACL, he would be in the top 10 of this draft. So that would be the guy that Philly could move up with the Jets, or the Jets could take at 10. That's the surprise guy.
I like it. Good call.
It is amazing how much thought and analysis goes in to one weekend. It's amazing. It really is. I get it. But just all the, maneuverings and the speculation, and Chad, as you said, what's going to be unexpected is going to happen. So you should expect the unexpected. Hate to use a cliche there, but It's just remarkable to hear you guys go so in depth. And I'm like, golly, the draft is only 3 days, but these teams invest so much in this.
The effects last for 5 years.
Far reaching, much longer than that.
It can be much longer. That's right.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that'll wrap us up for today. Chad, thanks so much for coming on and doing this with us. Hopefully you'll come on next week and you're not tired of us yet. He is at Chad_Reuter on Twitter. That's REUTER. That's the music. So that means I'm supposed to hurry. So he's at Marcus_Mosher. He's the host of Locked On Cowboys, and he covers the Raiders for USA Today. And I am at Harrison NFL on Twitter. We will catch you tomorrow with some coach talk, some Bruce Arians talk. Thank you, everybody. And hey, leave us a comment. We could use it. We love it. It's nice to hear from you guys occasionally. We want to make sure you're okay. See you, everybody.